Hi, I'm Kai Cheng Tom, and you're watching Ask Kai, Quick Tips for the Apocalypse, a series of short videos in which I answer all of your questions about how to survive and thrive in the middle of a pandemic, which is maybe just our lasting reality now. Surviving and thriving in a pandemic. That's your life. Get used to it. So, the writer of this question identifies as Asian. They have a white partner, and they say, I am in a relationship with a white partner, and I feel like I can talk to them about anything, but I'm having a really hard time starting a conversation about my experience as a person of color right now. And I want to foreground this question by mentioning that it came in around the time of the recent atrocities, the mass shooting in Atlanta of 8 people in Asian-run massage parlors, 6 of whom were Asian women. I did want to take a second to really hold this question in the gravity that I think it deserves, partially because I feel that gravity in my own body as an Asian woman. We have been experiencing an upsurge in anti-Asian racism on the street, in the media, in public, for the past year and a little bit, I think largely due to the messaging that has come out around the COVID-19 pandemic. But of course, anti-Asian racism is not a year and a little bit old. I'm not a scholar of racial history, but I do know that anti-Asian racism extends at least as far back as European contact with, quote, the Middle Kingdom, and particularly came to a head when East Asians and Southeast Asians began to do migration from their countries of origin to colonial nations, such as, quote, Canada and, quote, the United States of America. And particularly if we look at the media and messaging from politicians around that time, there was a lot of demonization of the Asian body, of the East Asian body, as demonic, as being part of this yellow peril. So this actually this very old comparison of Asian people to disease, to like a disease that was sweeping through and going to overtake the population. Eugenics was a very openly advocated philosophy for nation planning. And so there was this belief that in order to keep a nation white, Asian people needed to be kept separate. And so there were all of these kinds of laws that happened here on Turtle Island. For example, in Canada, it was much more difficult to migrate to Canada as a Chinese woman. It was basically impossible for most people, whereas it was relatively easier to migrate as a Chinese man until they decided they didn't want those people either, and then created a head tax and then an exclusion act and this increasingly desperate attempt to stop us from coming. So there's deep history there. I would be remiss not to mention the Japanese internment as well. So there's many examples of atrocities being committed by the colonial nation states of Canada and the United States of America, as well as others around the world, that were particularly targeted toward Asians. And there's a similarly long and terrible history of East Asian women being sexually exploited by colonial nations of all kinds. And here we can extend beyond white colonial nations and look at imperialism within the continent of Asia as well. I won't go into all the details of that, but needless to say, there is a really terrible history and intersection of racism, sexual racism, and East Asian and Southeast Asian bodies that leads to the moment we're in today. I think it might be fair to say that we are having a new conversation around the experience of Asian people of color in North America / Turtle Island today. And that conversation is really difficult to start, I think, because part of the way that white supremacy works is to put things into a binary. So for a really long time, white supremacy has shielded the way that it works by saying it's only about Black folks and white folks, or only about Indigenous folks and colonizers. The particular way that anti-Asian racism has operated is to be not understandable or not comprehensible to the mainstream. And so when it happens, people don't recognize it as racism because they're like, oh, well, that doesn't count, or that's not how I think about racism. And so really important to unpack how this anti-Asian racism happens, particularly because Asians are used as the wedge. And so there's this idea that Asians are in some way more desirable than other people of color, but also still dehumanized. And this wedge, and we can think about it now as the model minority stereotype, has been used to invisibilize the ways that Asians are actually acted against in our society, while also turning Asians against Black, Indigenous, and other racialized people. So that it sets up this antagonism that then distracts racialized communities in general from really understanding or looking at how white supremacy is the center of how racism works. So all of this to say, this might be a reason that it's so hard to bring up the experience with your partner to our dear question asker, because we aren't given very many tools for explaining what it means to be an Asian person in a white dominant society. And so all this to say is, to Asians out there who are wondering how to talk about this with white partners, it's not on you. It's not on you to explain. And there are some really, really powerful, important reasons why it might feel difficult or frightening, scary to explain. Because what happens if your white partner doesn't understand? Like, chances are they might if you're in a really loving partnership and you can talk to them about anything. But there's a chance they might not. And so, it might be helpful to ask one's white partners or white loved ones to do some thinking before they have a conversation, to do some reading, to talk about it, with other white folks who are in the know, who are, I don't like this word, but who are woke maybe, to start preparing. And the really important thing to prepare for is I might hear something I don't understand. I might have to face what it means to be part of a perpetrator class, which is the group that has committed a cultural or collective atrocity. So, for the white partners involved, developing the capacity for accountability, the ability to make the account is really, really important, and to hear the account. So, this I guess is, I don't know if this is advice or a quick tip, but this is my suggestion, that for those of us who are Asian and experiencing this pain, to know that it's not all on us to explain, and to really take some time to care for ourselves, to ask ourselves what we would need when we're telling the story of who we are and what we're experiencing. And then for all of us, right, to really think about this experience of anti-Asian racism and being Asian, in a white dominant world, as one part of many connected pieces, right? The shooting is part of a deep history of anti-Asian racism, and the deep history of anti-Asian racism is a part of an even bigger history of white colonization and the way that Asians have been leveraged to further the enslavement of Black folks and the genocide of Indigenous people and many, many other kinds of colonial atrocities. So we all have a part to play, and we all have a bigger story that we're a part of. And I would also really like to invite folks who are interested in getting involved in organizing to stop Asian hate and prevent anti-Asian racism, to look particularly at two organizations that have been doing a lot of work around the intersection of migration, hypersexualization, sex worker rights, and anti-Asian racism right now. And one of them is Red Canary Song in New York City. And the other is Butterfly Asian and Migrant Sex Workers here in Toronto. Both of these organizations do fantastic work, are at the center of the conversation and the struggle for Asian migrant rights and Asian migrant sex worker rights. And I know they're both taking donations. So if you are interested in getting involved in a material way, I really encourage folks to check out those links. And lastly, I just want to thank the asker of that question. I'm wishing them a lot of luck and a lot of love as they move forward. Your journey is unique to you, yet it connects to the journey of so many of us. And so for those of us who are Asian and affected by what's happening in the world around us today, I'm wishing you all the deepest of luck and love and the deepest of solidarity too. We are strongest when we stand together, and we're even stronger when we stand in solidarity with other racialized communities. So, a reminder that we are not alone, that we have power and responsibility both, and I really believe it is in us the capacity to change this world into a better one. Thanks so much, everybody. You've been watching Ask Kai, Quick Tips for the Apocalypse. I'm Kai Cheng Tom. Stay safe. Wash your hands, get vaccinated if you can, and be well.